I am Dr. Jennings, and today I'm going to briefly introduce CAS and what it is, how it looks here at Lincoln, and what full IB students need to do to successfully complete their CAS program. To start, this image shows the IB diploma program, and it shows where CAS, what CAS's role is in that program. And so if you look on the outside of this circle, you can see that you have the six different subject areas, starting with studies in language and literature and going all the way around. And then inside of that, you have what's made up of the IB core. And so that involves the theory of knowledge course, the extended essay, and then our focus for today, CAS, which stands for creativity, action, and service. And so the nature of CAS in each one of those strands, you can see defined here. And so with creativity, it is exploring and extending ideas leading to an original or interpretive product or performance. So it's any time that a student is creating an original work of some kind. Action or activity is physical exertion contributing to a healthy lifestyle. And then service is collaborative and reciprocal engagement with the community in response to an authentic need. And so the timeline for CAS is it is something that starts day one of the student's junior year, and IB states that it must continue for at least 18 months. So it is an ongoing thing that students will do over the course of 18 months. And here at Lincoln, the CAS portfolios are due in April 1st of their senior year. And what's included in those CAS portfolios is what we'll talk about next. And so the CAS portfolio's purpose is to indicate that students have achieved the learning outcomes that are set forth by IB. And so in CAS experiences, students reflect. And in those reflections, students must provide evidence that they've achieved these seven learning outcomes. On the next couple of slides, you're going to see those seven learning outcomes. And so you can see the first five there. Feel free to pause and read through these. I'm not going to read them to you, but these are ultimately the seven learning outcomes that IB says students must have accomplished by the time they complete their CAS portfolio in April of their senior year. And then you've got some greater detail with each one of those learning outcomes here, with descriptions of how the student can achieve each one of those seven learning outcomes. So there are the first three. Again, feel free to pause to read and get a closer look. And so, as I've mentioned, all seven outcomes must be present at some time throughout the 18-month CAS experiences to meet IB's requirements. Some of them can be demonstrated many times, while others might only be achieved once or twice, and that's completely fine. And so then we get into how do we prove this? What is the evidence? And so there's a reflective piece, but then there's actual physical evidence piece as well. So you're going to write reflections indicating how the experience helped you to achieve the learning outcomes that you've indicated. And then, so with each experience, will indicate what learning outcome you're achieving. You're going to do a little write-up indicating what that is, and then include a piece of evidence. For the overwhelming majority of students, that evidence is a photo of them participating in that experience. There are about a dozen other pieces of evidence that you could utilize listed here. But ultimately, for a lot of kids, they just use photos of even those items. So even if the student did have a brochure with an explanation of what the student was doing, they would take a picture of that and upload it to their CAS as part of their CAS portfolio. And so how much is enough? How much CAS over the span of 18 months is expected? And so that is approximately 150 hours, with 50 of that devoted towards creative endeavors, 50 of that devoted toward activity, action endeavors, and 50 of that towards service endeavors. So over the span of the 18 months, 150 hours. If you were to average that out, students should be participating in CAS around 1 hour and 45 minutes per week to remain on track to reach 150 by April of their senior year. And again, it should be a reasonable balance between those creative, action, and service-oriented experiences. And so the student responsibilities are to reflect, plan, do, and reflect over an 18-month period, and taking part in a range of different CAS experiences, including at least one CAS project. And we'll detail that, what that means and is here in a moment. These activities will be kept track of and logged in ManageBack, and you will receive separate information on how to go about documenting these CAS experiences in ManageBack. And ultimately, those portfolios are showing evidence of the achievement of the 7 CAS learning outcomes through the documentation of reflections and evidence regularly updated in ManageBack. And then as part of this process, you will participate in required 3 CAS advisor interviews with the CAS coordinator. And I've mentioned several times that your CAS portfolio should be done by April 1st of your senior year. IB does want to make clear what is not CAS, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of these. Again, feel free to pause and read over all of them as you would like. But those first two are really the ones that I see more than any others, where students say, "Is this CAS?" And I say, "Do you do these?" And then I'll have to say, "No, sorry, that's not CAS." So if they receive a grade for the experience, it is not CAS. In the same vein, if they receive financial compensation, that is not CAS. IB wants CAS to be something that students are doing organically and by choice. And so those two incentives, whether it be a grade or financial compensation, run against that idea. And again, feel free to read the rest of those, pause and read the rest of those. And so how is this assessed? The CAS coordinator will look to see, is there evidence of the 7 learning outcomes? Were the experiences sustained over the 18 months? So it's not just, do I hit an hour count and then I'm done? No, it includes ongoing CAS experiences, and then a balance between the 3 strands: creative, action, and service strands. And then you must include a CAS project. In order to earn the full IB diploma, students must do CAS. It is required that students successfully complete CAS to have the opportunity to earn the full IB diploma. Now, I've mentioned a CAS project several times, and so let's take just a few moments to dive into the CAS project. It is relatively simple, and so I'll detail it here. The CAS project can be from one or more of the 3 CAS strands, so creative, active, or service-oriented experiences. Students should be working collaboratively on these CAS projects. And so that could be with other full IB students, could be with the community, or could be with just other students. It does need to involve some degree of research and planning, and it must be at least partially student-driven and initiated. So students are taking on the leadership role in this CAS experience. And so I often describe it as something where the student's basically taking the adult role and doing kind of all the behind-the-scenes stuff that an adult would do to put on an experience. And I'll give you a few examples of those here in a moment. And so the other detail from the CAS project that differentiates it from other CAS experiences is, from the time of planning to its conclusion, the project must be at least 1 month. So essentially working collaboratively, taking on a leadership role, and having a CAS experience that extends beyond 1 month's time. And so here are a couple of examples of CAS activities. I'll jump around a little bit here, but a creative CAS project we've had in the past is where a student group planned, designed, and created a mural for the school. An action-based CAS project where students organized an intramural sports with middle school students, and they held practices for several weeks, and then it culminated in a tournament the final week of the CAS project. Service example is where students have set up and conducted tutoring for students in need, and so it was a student-run tutoring organization. Here are some examples of CAS projects with multiple strands involved. Creativity and activity: students choreograph a routine for the dance team, and so you can see it's creative in that they're creating the dance, and then it's active, actually performing the dance. A service and activity: students plan and participate in the planting and maintenance of a garden courtyard. So you have the service and activity aspects appearing in that CAS project that would need to span about a month. And then lastly, we've got a couple more examples. I'll just pop down to the bottom one that has all three. So creativity, activity, and service. We've had a group of students who worked with one of the elementary schools in their after school program where they went over to the school. They worked with those students to write, rehearse, perform, and then they sold tickets to the parents that they donated to charity. And the students performed, they put on a play. So you can see that how that would span several months, this one in this instance, and the students ultimately had a final product of putting on a play. So that is CAS, and that is the CAS project. Thank you for listening.